Here we are from all over the world, and it looks like there's actually folks here. So, Coach Lorri from Team Wilpers here with Coach Brian Hammond, and we're rocking and rolling in week one of our endurance challenge for the fall. How you doing, Brian?
I am doing fantastic, and we're getting pretty good at this signing on thing.
You don't know the stress on my end before you even get here. I'm like, okay, I have to go through, turn off Bluetooth on all the other devices, turn down volume on all the devices,
Yeah,
figure out how to log into
but
YouTube,
after
and
2, 3 months of doing this, we're actually figuring it out. Not too bad.
I
Good learning
know.
curve.
I'm not sure we're actually live though. There we go. There's that
Yeah, this is
delay. I
live.
forgot about it. Now I see
Yeah.
us over there. Yeah. So that's awesome. Um, what are you up to this week?
What am I up to? Well, I just made a batch of granola, so I'm pretty pumped about that because I
You
love,
made granola. How did you make
yeah,
granola?
with oats, rolled oats, and maple syrup and olive oil, and you just bake it like you make it. It's so easy. Like, it's literally the
That's
easiest
awesome.
thing, and granola is so expensive, which for no reason why is it expensive, but yeah, I just made a batch.
Right.
So I'm super pumped about that because I can snack on that all day. What else is going on? I'm moving, so, like, I'm moving to a different house in Vermont,
Yeah.
so that's all this week, so I'm a little hectic on that stuff, which means I'm not riding that often, which is great.
Yeah.
Kinda like my little bit of an off season right now, unlike you, who is, like, in the height of your season. Uh-oh, she froze. It's the altitude. She's freezing because of the altitude. She's up high. It takes longer
I
for the
know.
message to get up there.
Well, I'm hearing is your volume turned off on your other device?
I don't have another device open.
Ah, man, I don't know what's going on. Oh, because you're no. Good
Nothing.
morning, Maggie. I'm hearing us from another device. So I turned YouTube off on the other device. I did that. We're now
That's
live,
probably a
so that's
good
okay. Yeah.
idea.
You were
Yeah.
talking about granola and we were talking about the off season. And my off season isn't here yet. I can't wait. I'm already planning what I'm going to do. I'm going to do disco roller skating and skate skiing, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Taekwondo, and probably go running and lift weights at least for a couple weeks because I'm going it tomorrow. Tomorrow's our first stage.
Yeah. To explain what's going on. So now this is the
This is
Rebecca's private Idaho deal with
yes.
it's a stage race though.
It is a stage race. So Rebecca Rush, who has had a profound impact on my life, I will say that. I first met her in 2007 at the Olympic Training Center. They held their very first women's coaching summit, and I was the keynote speaker, which was great, talking about
Nice.
how to develop a women's cycling program. And there were maybe 120 coaches there, and each coach in the beginning stood up and introduced themselves. And she said, "I'm Rebecca Rush. I'm not a coach." And I knew her name a little bit from the adventure racing world. So she has been an athlete her entire life. She has been an Olympian in various and world champion in various skiing and adventure racing and single speed mountain biking, all these things. But she stood up and she said, "I'm an adventure racer sponsored by Red Bull, and Red Bull changed their program. They're not going to sponsor adventure racing anymore. I have to learn how to mountain bike." And mountain biking is part of adventure racing, but it's a very minor part. And she was always terrible at it. She was terrified. And she would tell these stories about her teammates dragging her across hills
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. And she said, "I need to learn as much as I can about the sport of cycling." So she wasn't a coach. She was at this coaching summit and she just wanted to learn. And she's such an inspirational woman. There are a number of films about her and her adventures in her life, and she's written a couple of books. And I remember reading Rush to Glory, I think it was called, or Rush to Glory first. And she's just an awesome woman. And she started this gravel race back in, I guess we're 12 years in now, so 2013. And it has become one of the largest gravel races in the United States, one of the first, also one of the only stage races in the United States. So it went from being a 1 day race with two different distances, and it's Idaho. So I think she called it the big potato and the little fry originally, and now it's the baked potato, the tater tot, and the small fry, and it's also a stage race. So I've raced the 1 day race a number of times. I've come back this year to race the stage race. We start tomorrow with something that I'm really excited about, and most gravel racers aren't, which is a really technical single track mountain bike style stage. It's about 35 miles with 3,000 feet of climbing, and I'm
Wow.
excited because the trails that I ride are mostly single track, and most gravel racers are used to, like, big, wide fire roads with
Mhm.
little pebbles on it and dirt, and so I think this should be fun, although it's really cold here. I didn't quite prepare for 30s, and it's really
Yeah.
cold in the mornings. And
That's
then
it's common in altitude for it to be
yeah.
chilly in the morning.
And I should know, I've been here this is my 4th time here. I should know this, but I think I'll be fine. We're actually it's warming up. Yesterday got into the 80s, so, it'll be chilly in the morning, but in the 50s, which is good. And then Friday, we have a hill climb, and it's an interesting stage because the total mileage for the day is about 50. But the first 20 is a neutral, gentle climb. It's about 3%. And then you get to a 4.5 mile time trial. It's an uphill time trial. So we will climb as an individual, and then you have to roll back to the start. So you get 50 miles for the day, but only 4.5 miles of that are timed.
Oh,
And then,
like an enduro
yeah,
race, or well,
exactly.
opposite, right? It's the climb, not the downhill.
Exactly. And so the key is not to get too excited, not to try to go too hard on the neutral parts, which is interesting with a big mix of athletes, right? You've got athletes who are professional athletes, and you've got athletes who are amateur doing their first races. And so
So
being patient.
there's a trick to that kind of race. So the trick to those kind of timed climb rides is start in the back of your group. Like
Right.
actually disconnect. Like you actually want to disconnect like 30 seconds, 20 seconds, like a little bit back from your group. Let them cross the line. 30 seconds later, you cross the line and rejoin the group because then technically you're 30 seconds ahead of them already
Right. Right.
once you join the
Except they
group.
start you individually.
Yeah, no,
So
exactly. Oh, wait, so they're gonna do like one at a time, like a time trial?
exactly. So once you get to the top of
Oh,
the hill, I think they stage the top 20 riders, so top 10 women, top 10 men, and then everybody else as you get to the top. So I'm gonna just chill. I found a restroom on the way up. I've been using this as my training course. So I'm like, whatever, I'll stop, use the restroom. The key for all of this is nutrition and
yeah,
hydration.
for sure.
So, you know,
Yeah, because I was like in those kind of times, because a lot of Grand Fondos and stuff have those time climb sections. And the
yeah,
key is to disconnect, reconnect to the small group that you're in, the peloton that you're in, and
yeah,
then just work your way up through that group because you're ahead of them at that point in time because you actually
exactly.
started behind them. That's a real kind of key there. But yeah, if it's a straight
And
time
with
trial,
Strava segments, right? If
then
you ride with a group on
totally right.
Strava, don't be the first to get there. Be the
Yes.
last and then hit it.
And then
So,
hit it.
yeah.
Yes, exactly
So
that.
that's Friday. Saturday is an optional. It's a rest day, but there's a social ride. But my coach and I were chatting. It's at 7:30 in the morning, and if I have to weigh a social ride versus a little extra sleep, I'll probably go a little extra sleep and just do a nice recovery ride on my own, um, and show up for the group photo at the end of the
Mhm.
7:30 ride. And then Sunday is the big deal. So Sunday is 102 miles. It's about almost 7,000 feet of climbing, and it's exciting. So this is technically a training race for me. They're only doing podium for top 3 men and top 3 women. And as a 59-year-old woman, there's no age group, and so the likelihood of me being in the top 3 is pretty low with the number of pros that are here. But it's a good training block at altitude, which should serve me next week when I go race nationals in Nebraska. So I'm
And
pretty
then
excited.
are you staying in Idaho before heading to Nebraska?
A couple days, yeah. So I won't do the back and forth. If I thought it through, I probably would have stayed here a little longer and then gone to Nebraska and just stayed at altitude because we're a little
Yeah.
higher here than we will be there. But I also wanted to get there, get settled, ride the course a few times. I'll have a
Well,
car
the
there. I mean,
argument is you'll actually recover better there than
yeah,
you will here
yeah,
because of the altitude. Your sleep quality will be a lot better. So it's kind of like one of those things of you're not going to lose the altitude
right,
in that amount of time, and you're probably going to gain better recovery quality. I would actually, yeah, you're probably doing it the smart way, even though,
right,
yeah, our gut tells us to stay up as high as we can for as long as we can. But it takes 7 days or so to really start
right.
to lose that. So
And
yeah,
luckily, I
you
got
should be
here
good.
Friday night, so I'm like, I just ran downstairs to do a load of laundry, and I didn't get out of breath running back up. So I know I'm acclimated, right?
I do that at sea level. I get out of breath running back up the stairs.
Yeah,
So
I know running. It's
yeah, for
for
me, the altitude last week when I was in Colorado was the sleep. The sleep is really what bothers me. And this it's funny because so many of us use our Garmin watches or the Whoop and stuff like that, and we look like the moment we wake up, we look at our sleep score, right? Our
Right.
stress level and stuff like that. And mine were horrible across the board, but I was still sleeping like 8 or 9 hours, like my typical. But
Mhm.
because my respiratory rate was higher, and because my resting heart rate was higher, because my respiratory rate was higher, my body, my Garmin was assuming that I was still in stress while I was sleeping.
Ah,
So I was waking up to these bad scores and I wasn't feeling great as it was. So that was like really getting in my head to where like I actually stopped and think about it. I was like, wait a minute, like why am I looking at these numbers? Like they're
yeah,
not
don't look at
they
them.
yeah, they don't apply to me. And I usually don't look at them unless I feel crappy. And then when I feel
Mhm.
crappy, I look at it, it's showing me like I'm stressed all like I was more stressed at night according to my Garmin than I was during the day, which is
Yeah.
weird, right? Because
Now
during the day, my heart rate would naturally be higher walking
yeah.
around, where at night it's much, much lower. But yeah, it was high. So it was assuming I was fighting something when it was really just the air, right? Like
Well,
I
it
was
might
actually
also
still getting
be,
quality.
didn't you have a little bug?
I definitely had a bug for
Yeah.
sure. Um,
So that may have also affected what I've noticed here. So I'm probably under less stress here than I am at home because I'm still working. But beside that, I'm training about an hour and a half to 2 hours a day, and I'm, going to the grocery store and stuff like that. So I'm relatively relaxed. My resting heart rate's actually really low. My dreams are off the hook. I have had the craziest dreams, including about some of our people in our Facebook group, and I won't tell you about them. But um, and I've had dreams about Matt. I've had dreams about a friend that I'm going to see in a couple of weeks, and just really realistic dreams. And I wake up pretty frequently. My aura ring is telling me my sleep is really good. My heart rate's low. My respiratory rate is normal. All of those things seem to be really normal because I think I'm under less overall stress. My HRV app, it's very interesting. I use HRV for training, and they actually have now put in a function where, like on race day, you don't have to see what your
yeah,
score
they
is.
block it out. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can still you can tell as you do it. But right now I'm feeling pretty good. But the dreams, and then I wake up, of course, with the bloody noses and the bloodshot eyes. And
Yeah, it's the
yesterday I
dryness.
shot a Facebook Live video. Well, I couldn't do it live because there was no signal, but I shot a video, and I looked at my skin and I was like, "You look like 15 years older than you are," because of the altitude. So I've been pre-hydrating. Brian and I were actually talking about this morning. Take it first thing in the morning, full glass of water. My coach has me putting a sodium product in it. Um, and not a product I typically use. And it seems to be helping with hydration. It also gives you that need for thirst. So, anyways, I'm super excited. I feel like, and this was one of the things I was thinking about in regards to the FTP test, which is I've done the work. I have trained so
Hmm.
hard for this event and I've been so consistent, and it will be what it is at this point. And I think I'm ready. I just have to, I went through yesterday and put together everything in the calendar. I put together step by step my nutrition plan for each of the stages. And now I just have to execute. And I think the same thing is true with the FTP test. We're going to talk about that a little later, but you've done the work, make the plan. All you have to do is execute, get out of your own head. That's also good advice for taking the FTP test. But let's see who's
Yeah.
here this morning. I see everybody commenting, and I'm so excited you're all here. Maggie and Amy, who we see every week, thank you. We appreciate you so much. And Rebecca is here. And Laura, hi, Laura. And Will, I remember Will from last week. And Laura, she lives at 8,000 feet. I know, isn't it crazy what altitude does? I live at 33 feet. I probably don't even live at that. That's the height of my apartment, I think. So, and it is good. Those nice cool temperatures are great for running. Not as good for cycling because we get a little cold
Chilly.
with wind chill. But yeah.
Yeah.
And Larry, welcome to your first challenge. We're very excited to have you here too. And Linda made it. Are you at the beach today, Linda? She may have left. Somebody left. They were like, blah, blah, blah. That's actually what I write in our outline, blah, blah, blah.
Literally, she writes blah blah blah.
So, anyways, we're all glad you're here today. I want to give a couple other shout outs this morning before we get started on our topic for the day, which is FTP testing and training zones. And I want to recognize Mary Hoffman. Hey, Linda, we're so glad you're still here. Mary, who's a Team Wilpers athlete, is racing. She has been riding the Peloton for 6 or 7 years. got a bike, got a gravel bike, and she's racing RPI as well. I have yet to meet her, but
Nice.
I have promised her coach that I will take her under my wing and help her with the technical aspects of executing this race as well. It's a big event for a first
Is
race,
she doing
and
the full stage race or just the weekend race?
she is doing what's called a la carte. So this year they're offering you can do any of the stages individually as well.
Oh, cool.
So she has registered for the first two stages, and then on the last day she's going to do the one of the shorter versions, the French fry and the tater tot. One of the shorter ones. It's still like
Awesome.
50
Still
miles
like
or
three,
six
yeah, it's
thousand
still
feet
like three
climbing or
days
something
of like
crazy.
40. It's like three
Yeah,
racing days of 40 miles. Like regardless, that's
it's
like
perfect.
gotta, yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's so great.
So shout out to Mary for having the courage
Yeah,
to
Barry.
step up and do a great event. And then Alicia yesterday posted about passing her ACE certification as a personal trainer, and that's awesome. More knowledge, more power, and that's the start of something really exciting, I think. And then I just want to acknowledge again, Chris Miller. You know, Brian and I have both been pretty busy onboarding folks with the new challenge, especially Brian with the changes with Training Peaks. I think he's probably been online probably 12, 18 hours a day getting everybody going. And Chris is always there to step in with extra knowledge and pointing out posts to us or answering things herself and posting links. And she's responsible for all the daily post links and does this all out of the goodness of her heart. So I really want to say thank you very much to Chris for all she does with, behind the scenes to keep everything going. So yeah. Uh, Topic of the day. I didn't post a lunchtime poll, did I? I don't even remember now. But I wanted to talk a little bit about FTP because everybody was talking about it yesterday. And Brian, tell me, what are your thoughts about what is FTP? What is the purpose? Why do we take an FTP test or a ramp test or estimate our zones? Tell me about this.
FTP
What
is
does it
not a
stand for? Let's start with
it's
that.
not a test. Functional threshold power.
Okay.
All right.
And what is
So
that?
exactly. Great question. Great follow-up question, Lori.
I know
So
we're good at this.
your FTP, your functional threshold power, is the power you're supposed to be able to hold from about 45 minutes to 75 minutes. It differs on the person, differs on a lot of different factors, but basically 45 minutes to 75 minutes. Now, for those of people that have trained with heart rate in the past, a lot of people are familiar with heart rate training, right? It was very popular, especially through the 90s and the early 2000s. It's the same thing as like your threshold heart rate. That's really what we're looking at here. So threshold heart rate, we always used heart rate before power meters because they were easily available. So they were just a prediction of what our power was or our pace was, things of that nature. So they found a very good correlation between our threshold heart rate to our functional threshold power. What that basically means is we all understand lactic acid, right? Like you start to kind of
Out.
work so hard, your legs start to burn, right? So your threshold, your FTP or your threshold is that kind of breaking point. So if I stay underneath my FTP, then my body is reusing this lactate as energy. It's recycling it. Okay. So I always remember this as you remember that like I Love Lucy when she's at the conveyor belt with the chocolates,
Yes.
right? So this is like when it's at normal speed and she can box the chocolates no problem, right? That's under your FTP. The lactate's being kind of put back into the system. And then once you go above that, slightly above it, well, that means you can't keep up with it anymore. So now you're starting to shove these chocolates in your mouth. And at first, not too bad,
Mhm.
right? But sooner or later, even at a slow pace, it's going to start to build, right? You can't empty that bucket. And then sooner or later, you have to slow down. So that's really what your FTP is representing is where is that line for you? And it doesn't make you a better cyclist. Well, it does if you are higher, right? That's what we're trying to improve this thing. But there are a lot of cyclists that I race with that have a lower FTP than me that beat me on a regular basis,
And
right?
why
Like
is
it's
that?
not, it's because they're better. No,
Yeah.
it's how they're producing this power, how they're using their power. You know, like this FTP is really important for if you were a triathlete, a time trialist, right? Are you doing a 1 hour
Hard,
power,
constant effort.
hard, constant effort? Are you doing a triathlon? Are you doing time trial? Are you doing long hill climbs? maybe in the Tour de France, and you're doing these 20 or 30, 45-minute hill climbs. Like, your FTP is a really important thing. But if I'm a sprinter, FTP is not really that important to me, because I'm basically just hiding in the peloton all day, riding at zone 2, zone 3, and then I sprint for 30 seconds. Right? I'm
Right.
never at that threshold level necessarily. So FTP is just a marker. That's all it
And we
is.
should also mention, when you're talking about performance, that FTP in and of itself is not important unless you're on a flat road.
Correct.
At our power to weight ratio. So the combination of body weight and the power we can produce is what produces my speed relative to another racer. So, for example, as a 5'10" woman who weighs about 155 pounds, if my FTP is 200 and I'm racing against a woman who's 5'2" and 100 pounds and her FTP is 200, I'm never going to see her. She's going to be
Correct.
gone. But if we're on a flat road and let's just say her FTP is 180 and mine is 200, I'm going to outpower her, which is
Correct.
why we say different courses for different horses, right? So we're each built to do different things. And I may outride someone on the flats or the descents, and that same person may outride me on the hills. Now, of course, most of our races have hills, so that's an important thing. But
But the
yeah.
type of hill is super important, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
the type of climbing that I would face, or you were facing out in Idaho and Colorado, are these very long, kind of drawn out 20, 30-minute climbs, where in
Mhm.
Vermont here, the climbs are 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, super steep. So that's a VO2 max, right? So
Right.
being able to produce above your FTP is important, where in these longer climbs, you're going to be staying in that zone 4, right?
Mhm.
You're controlling that effort through that period of time. So the real key with FTP is to not put as much importance on it as most of us do,
Right.
and just view it as an honest thing of like, hey, this is where you are currently, and it's about your energy systems.
Mhm.
That's the important part. And then when we look at this, why is this important? Is because as a coach, right, we see this FTP level. I have two ways to bump this FTP level up from a thought process. I can either push it up from below, working at below my FTP and work on raising this, or I can come over the top and pick it up,
Yeah,
working
which
up
is
from
what we just
above,
did.
right? Which is exactly what we did in that
Sprint challenge.
sprint challenge. So when we don't have a good number, and I'm trying to get my client to work at maybe just below it, but your number's wrong, well, that means you're changing the level. Maybe you're actually above this effort. Maybe you're too far below the effort, right? So having a true, honest number is important, which is why doing the test properly is so important.
Right.
Doing that 3 or 5 minute blowout effort, which in your head seems pretty stupid. You're like, wait a minute, I'm going to crush myself for 3 to 5 minutes and then I'm going to do a 20-minute test. There's a reason we do that. It's to kind of get rid of that anaerobic kind of system. So you're really relying on this aerobic and anaerobic kind of combination of recycling that lactate.
And that was
Because
one
what
of
we
our questions in one of the chats yesterday. Oh man, I forgot about that stupid 5 minutes. Why do we do that 5 minutes? Then I can't do the 20-minute as well. Well, there's a reason for that. We want
that's
you
exactly why.
to be aerobic, not anaerobic.
Yes. Like, I always
And
say to most of my athletes is, I'd rather you slightly underestimate your FTP than overestimate your FTP.
agreed.
Like,
And it's
and
funny
that's the
because a
thing,
lot
is
of
like,
people
do that
will
test.
round up. They like the
Yeah.
right. Oh, my FTP is 180. I might as well round up to 200. That's a
Yes.
very different training system when you look at the percentage of effort there. So,
And it's also, because we also get into this thing of like, oh, we're working out today. Today's a hard day. I can go harder than what my number is telling me to do.
right.
Right. And we're never training. Well, I don't want to say never, but we're hardly ever training at our maximum capabilities. Right. So remember, we just said FTP. So you're zone 4, high zone 4, right? So you're 100% of zone 4. You can do that for 45 minutes to 75 minutes. When in class do we ever ask you to do that for 45 minutes?
Right.
Never. They're always 8-minute blocks, 10-minute blocks, 15-minute blocks, 20-minute blocks, right? So, yes, you could go harder for that period of time, but you shouldn't go harder for that period of time, because we're trying to, again, lift this up from below possibly. So that's the thing, is
And
I
as
think people game it and they just
coaches,
don't.
when we design workouts, we're looking at the accumulated load. So if I'm
Correct.
doing 10 4-minute efforts, well, there's my 40 minutes. But if I were to mentally say to you, let's do 40 minutes, you'd be like, I'm going to pick a different class today. Or
Totally right.
I'm going to ride in a different zone. So when we modify things, with the exception, I would say, of our recovery, it's always okay, not always okay, but it's often okay to go a little easier in your recovery than what is planned. But sometimes when we're doing these hard efforts, we want you to maintain a certain level of heart rate. We want to keep that up, even though our power is going down. We want to keep the heart rate up. So then we're not going to modify. But Will has a question. How accurate is the 20-minute FTP versus a longer ride? And as I think everyone knows, when we do an FTP test, we actually discount it. And that's a strange word, but we use a calculus of 95% because we're estimating it based on the longer ride. And so, yeah, oftentimes our 20-minute number is inflated, and it depends on you as an individual. Some people are really good at doing that 20-minute effort. Some people aren't. And
Yeah.
as we
So
were talking in one of our recent polls, what's your favorite zone? It's kind of a silly question, but some people are better at the long sustained efforts. Some people are better at the shorter, harder efforts. And that's okay. We can train
yeah,
all of them.
the way I was asked this is like the FTP test was a test designed to be repeatable and attainable for the general athlete. So the best way to find your 1 hour power is to go hard for 1 hour.
Hmm.
There's no better test than that, right?
Yeah.
Everything else is a prediction of, right? The ramp test where you just kind of step it up, step it up, step it up, right? That's only going to last. That's only going to last maybe 8 minutes of hard effort.
Yeah.
And then you have the TT test, a 20-minute TT test, right? That's closer to the 60. So it's going to be a more accurate assessment than the ramp test is. Now, a 40-minute test would be more accurate than a 20-minute test, as long as the athlete is mentally strong enough to push for that time frame. And
Right.
that's where they came up with 20 minutes is they're saying, all right, in a non-race situation, general athlete, what's their mental capability? Can they really push as hard as they can for 40 minutes? A lot of people can't do that without a competitive nature. So
Right.
20 minutes is really where they kind of came to is like, hey, this is short enough, but long enough to actually give us a good understanding of where this person might be. And again, we knock it 5% off just to kind of get that true. Like, well, if I extended this out, I'd
Right.
probably have to drop my effort about 5% to maintain this. Because really what you're doing in this test is you're going slightly above your lactate threshold. Lactate starts to build, you start to get fatigued, and then you drop below it. And then you go above it, and then you drop below it. You go above it and below it, above and below it. And they're like, okay, well, this is probably where your line is. Again, it's an estimation of this, and everyone's going to be different. But you got to get as good of an estimation as possible.
And raise your hand if that 10 to 15-minute period is the hardest in the test mentally.
Oh my
Right?
God, 8 to 13. Forget about it.
Right. Yeah. And I have to do a lot of negotiation in that period. And then by the time you get to 15, it's, the horse smells barn at that point.
Yeah, you're like 5 more minutes left. Let's just
Right,
go.
exactly.
Yeah.
But that middle section, and it's
No,
very similar to
8
things.
minutes to 13 minutes. That's the
Is
window
that
for
the
me.
scientific window? Yeah.
That for me, because I'm like
Yeah.
8 minutes and I'm like, man, this is a long time to go.
And I'm not quite halfway yet. And it really hurts.
Yes, totally
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. We have another question from Larry. Without a power meter, how can we use heart rate data
Yeah.
from the test to interpret
So it's
FTP?
same exact. So the
Mhm.
heart rate test and the power test are the same exact test. You do it the same exact way. And then what you do is you take your heart rate for that 20-minute section. So during that 20-minute block, what was your average heart rate? It's going to be, I don't know, for me, it would be around a 168, 172, somewhere in there. That's my threshold heart rate. So that's the number I would use. In Training Peaks, you can put that rate actually in your account settings. You can go to your heart rate. You can put threshold heart rate. And I put, 168. And then I select whichever one. I usually use the Joe Friel 7.
There's another talk about why are all these zones different?
Yeah, there's so many
Garmin
different
versus
ones.
Training Peaks and 5 versus 7.
Yeah, and
It's
just pick it
interesting
and
that
then
you say that, Brian, because I've been operating under the assumption that you take the last 12 minutes of your heart rate, because that first 12 minutes it's starting to increase, but
ramp
then
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
guess that would be about right. Like use the last maybe 15 minutes of it
yeah,
or something like that. 10 to
and
15
then you're
would
going to get a little
probably
more accurate because the lower average at the beginning is going to skew that number.
just skew it a little bit. So that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, to run a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
then
I'd
of
say
course the
last
best
15 minutes of
thing
it or so.
that we can do, Larry, is start to understand the correlation between power, heart rate, and how we feel, what we call RPE or rating of perceived exertion. So if we want to go next level as athletes, feeling what our legs feel like, feeling what our lungs feel like at different power outputs. And I think that's the secret sauce. We're not going to
I
ride down the
can.
road
I
looking
have a
at
chart.
numbers.
Yeah, I have a chart that I created for the Training Peaks.
Mhm.
Um, I'll post it up on the Facebook.
Oh, that would be great.
And then what it basically is I created a chart. I mean, these charts are out there. It's not like I thought of this myself here, right?
The
And it
patented
basically
Brian
just says
Hammond
like,
method.
yeah, it just basically says the 7 zones that we know, the power zones that we know from recovery up to neuromuscular, and then it has the correlating percentage of FTP. It has the correlating percentage of your threshold heart rate, so that
Mm,
168 number I was talking about, and then correlating how I personally correlate. This is where it would differ from people. A scale of 1 to 10. So like a zone 2 would be like a 2 to 3. A zone 4, for instance, might be like a 5 to 7 effort on a scale of 1 to 10 for me. That's the RPE is the hardest thing for people to learn, and numbers
mhm.
help us learn that.
Yeah,
So what you do is like during a workout, you're like, oh man, this feels like a 7 to me. Look down, see what your heart rate is. And you're going to
mhm,
start to realize like, oh, every time I'm 155, I feel like I'm at a 7. Every time
yeah,
I'm above 170, I feel like I'm at a 10. Right. And there's actually a lot of research now that shows RPE is the best scale,
it is.
most accurate scale for your performance, because how you feel is going to be how you perform.
And
So
let
the
me
numbers
tell you,
lie
when you come to
sometimes.
altitude, it
Yeah.
feels so different.
Well,
You do
FTP
these
is 15 to 10 to
20
15% to
lower.
20% lower, like
Yeah.
guaranteed off the top. Like
But
forget
your
about it.
speed is gonna be higher depending on because there's less resistance.
Less
And,
resistance.
in the early days being at altitude, your heart rate's gonna be so unpredictable to look at. I had to do sprint efforts yesterday, and they were just 20-minute efforts, and of course, you don't feel it while you're doing 20 or 20-second efforts, sorry, 20-second sprint efforts. But, you finish the effort, and then by about 45 seconds, your heart feels like it's gonna burst from your chest. And I look down and I'm like, it's not really all that high. But yeah, so it was definitely, you have to understand how all of these things impact us. So, what else do we have? Larry's a good question asker. Uh,
It is.
Training peaks on the Apple Watch call recovery 179 beats per minute. Yeah, that's a pretty high recovery.
Well, yeah, versus workout 154. Larry, just all the workouts in Training Peaks. So anyone that's using Training Peaks, all the workouts are built with power.
Mhm.
So you're always going to see power numbers. You're not going to see heart rate numbers. I would have to build them separately. I would have to basically create two different workouts, one based on power and one based on heart rate. And both of those, you would have to select which one you wanted. You can't run a workout on both power and heart rate. Only one can be the driver of the thing. So if you don't have a power meter, heart rate should be your thing. You're just going to have to do a little bit of kind of mental work of knowing that if it's asking you to be at 150 watts, is that zone 2 or zone 3 for you? And what would the correlating heart rate zone be for that? So just make like a little cheat sheet to stick on your stem of your bike or something with the correlating zones. Because it shouldn't be giving you heart rate zone targets during your workouts currently. It should only be power zones. But you do have to make sure, and I'll post this on Facebook because forgot to remind people, is you do have to set your zones in Training Peaks. So if you go to account settings in Training Peaks, you'll see a section for zones. Just go on that. It'll give you a heart rate. You can put your heart rate zone in there. You can put your FTP in there. If you're a runner, you can put your running paces in there and swimming paces in there and all that stuff too. And then once you adjust your settings in your Training Peaks account, all the workouts from that point forward will be readjusted based on those numbers.
Mhm. And Laura,
So
I
if it
think that
changes, you
answers
can
your
always
question
update it
too.
as well. Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure. Brian, did you create a guide for setting up Training Peaks? Or
You
did
know
you
what?
had a Zoom? Or
I
can we
did.
do
I
a
had a Zoom yesterday, but I'll have them email the guide out,
yeah,
which also explains some of the different calculations that you see,
yeah.
normalized power, intensity factor, all that stuff.
And
Yeah.
make sure you address which system of zones to use. Nolan has this question about the power zones in
Yes, it's in
the
there. It's
power.
in the,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
So for the power zones, just so everyone that's here, for the power zones, I always pick the Andy Cogden 6 right? So it's
Because
like
he's the
Andy
god.
Cotton with a little 6 number. Now that's a little confusing for us because we always talk about 7 zones. Power Zone talks about 7 zones. Essentially, Andy Cogman, who created the 7 zones, they basically cut off zone 7 because it's neuromuscular power. So it
It's
happens
hard.
so quickly that it's literally 5 pedal strokes. They're like, just go to zone 6. Like if you go
Yeah.
above it, whatever. Like it's just, there's no real major difference between 6 and 7 from a power output perspective. It is from a neurological perspective of what
Mhm.
we're looking to gain out of this. So I always pick the 6 on that. For heart rate, I always pick the Joe Friel 7, which
And
is
then
typical
you wanna
7
make
zones.
sure in all the various apps you're using that you've set your FTP or your threshold heart rate, and everything is set up, your weight is set up, all the same things, and then you're gonna see all your apps should align pretty well, whether it's using Training Peaks or Strava or any other apps that you're using out there, Apple Health. So you have the options.
Yeah,
And
the hardest part about all these apps is updating
right.
all the FTPs and
It
stuff
would be
like
nice
that.
if they well, first of all, it would be
And
nice if we had one app that did everything.
Training Peaks is really nice in the fact of like if Training Peaks based on the data that you're putting in, like your workout data, they'll send you an email suggesting that you update your FTP or your threshold and stuff like that. So it's really
Mhm.
nice. Like they do that. Sometimes I just always ignore it
Yeah.
um, because
Especially
again,
when
I
they
might
say you should lower it, 20, 30 points, whatever. I'll
yes,
ignore it. I'm kidding.
I
You
yes.
should pay attention
Um,
to those.
but I ignore it when they ask me to bump it up sometimes if I'm in the middle of a training block because again, I'm also creating workouts like week 1, 2, and 3. Those workouts technically are easier compared to week 6, 7, and 8 because I'm assuming some fitness gains by week 7 and 8
Mhm.
that I'm accounting for. I'm now asking you to be at 95% more than I am now, when we're at
Yeah.
85% more, because I assume that you're getting stronger so we can be in a higher zone. So if you then bump your FTP up in the middle of the training plan, then those workouts might be overreaching a little too much. So
And it's also interesting, I'm on an app that will give me an estimated FTP as well, and I've just gone through a block where I've been doing almost all high intensity and not long sustained efforts, and it's
eh,
estimating my FTP much lower when we know it
lower,
probably isn't. I just haven't done the efforts that would fit into their algorithm. So,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah, it's looking
Anyways,
at your last, it's probably looking at your last 20-minute effort,
right,
hard
which
20-minute effort in the last 30
we
days.
haven't
And
been
you're like, well, I
doing because
haven't
we're
done
doing
any.
short hard. Yeah.
Right, which is
Um,
why, again, we said to everybody, like, it's good to retest because after like a short, hard block like that sprint challenge, your FTP might go down a little bit. And it's not
yeah,
because your fitness has gone down, it's because you just haven't practiced a 20-minute effort in
right.
3 months. So you're going to suck at it, right? You're not going to be very good at it.
Because I have to
So,
do one on Friday, right? This hill
yeah,
climb.
but
So,
that's not, again, it's not your ability, it's just where you are today at this
correct.
point, and that's expected to be down. Like my VO2 max efforts are horrible right now. My body's like, when's the last time you did an anaerobic effort?
Right.
I've been doing long gravel rides and stuff like that. My body, like, yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah. Anyways, we're going to wrap this part up. And I just want to say for everyone, especially who's doing the cycling challenge versus the Peloton class challenge, thank you for being our beta test, basically. And we know that there are going to be a couple of hiccups. And Brian and I are trying to be as vigilant as possible, spending a lot of time on Facebook answering questions. Please post them. Maybe we should start a question post, Brian. Maybe you should start a
Yeah,
question post since you're managing that part of the process and let
yeah.
people post them up there and we'll try to address them. I went through yesterday, apparently, the chat for this briefing and tried to answer everything or direct everything. So hopefully we've caught everything. You can also reach out to us directly at roadcycling@teamwilpers.com or reach out to Brian or I and we'll try to answer everything for you. Just caveat, I probably won't be on social media very much in the next 4 days because I'll be busy racing my bike and
Liar,
recovering
liar.
and
You're totally
squeezing
gonna
my
be on it.
legs.
You're
I
gonna be
know, I
sitting
know.
in bed with the
With
little
my squeezy
squeezers
legs on,
on
face
on
touching.
Facebook. You're going to be on
So
it more than you normally would.
I know. Well,
And just the
whatever.
other note, side note too, like the timers. Anyone that's using the timers on the Road Challenge side, the links are all there. The website itself, the timer website itself, seems to be having a problem. They didn't update some sort of, I don't know, I forget, certificate or
Oh,
something.
the
So it's like they could
certificate.
they could like steal your data or something like that. So I think the website just is not viewed as safe currently.
Yeah.
So that's your own risk of doing it or not. Like, we don't control that, unfortunately. We just use a website to create these timers. We're trying to find another option. The hard part is making these timers is not an easy task.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, recreating all these workouts. So unfortunately, the timers seem to be a little at the moment. So a good option if you're used to using the timers, if you have any sort of Garmin or Wahoo computer, you can just use that as your timer. The workouts will upload automatically to it, and you can follow it on that. Or go out and just buy a cheap one.
Hmm.
They have cheap Garmin's, and cheap is a relative term, obviously, for people. So I want to be
Right.
cautious of that. But usually around $100, you can get like the basic version Garmin cycling computer. You can technically run it off your watch as
Hmm.
well. So if you do have like a Garmin Forerunner or a running watch, you can run it off of
Wahoo
that.
Rival, all of those work.
Yep, all those also work. Maybe even the Apple Watch, I assume. I don't know. I don't have an Apple Watch.
Probably.
I don't know if you can upload. I know they
Yeah.
connect. I don't know if you workout uploads, but probably would. I
I
don't see why
used a
not anymore.
different, when I was running and using the Apple Watch, I had to use a different app to do the timers. So,
Yeah, but they also
yeah.
didn't. Apple
But
Watch
they've
didn't connect
updated a lot of
to
stuff. Yeah.
didn't used to not connect to Training Peaks, but now it does.
Yeah.
So I wonder if now you can actually share back and forth. I don't know.
Possibly.
If I don't have the product, I don't know it as well. So that's the hard
Yeah.
part. So the timers
But
are a little bit of a. Oh, it did with
Rebecca
the Apple
says,
Watch.
yes, it
Awesome.
worked with Apple Watch. Thank you.
Yeah.
See,
So
you
you should
guys
be
are
able
the
to
best beta
upload.
tester.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's why Training Peaks is so great for us, is because it uploads to all these devices easily, and you don't have
Hmm.
to, look at the screen, the computer screen, as being like, oh, I'm
Right.
at zone whatever. So
Yeah.
it
Good.
updates with your numbers, which is even better.
Hmm.
You
Good.
don't have to do the math.
So Brian will post
Cool.
a post and
Yes.
we'll throw all the questions in that one. I'm going to pin it to the top of the Facebook group, or I'll teach him how to pin it. I'm not sure he knows, or maybe he knows.
I don't know.
Anyways, a couple other things. You should have gotten an email today. If you're registered for the challenges, the email, I got two. I'm not sure why. Last week I didn't get
I'm
any,
not
but I got two
registered.
today. Um, and it will link you to the workouts. There was some confusion with some new folks. We are in week 1 now. Last week, some people started thinking that was week 1. So if you started last week, you're a little ahead. And on the Peloton side, you can see a week at a time. On the Training Peak side, I think now you can you see
See
the full
all. You can see
program?
all
Yeah.
8 weeks. Yeah.
Now, don't try to do them all at once. Remember, recovery isn't there for a reason. And the choice of when we select which workouts to do on which day is also there for a reason. We want you to go into the quality workouts, the hard workouts, rested and ready to go. And so hopefully you can follow some semblance of the schedule. If you have questions about how to reschedule things, if you've got travel or you're going to be away from a bike, let us know that as well, and we're happy to help. And again, you're free to post these, because if you have that question, probably other people do as well. We have some live rides coming up. This is something new for this challenge. And so for those of you who are doing the Peloton class challenge this Saturday, we're going to ride live with Matt, and it's an 8 a.m. Eastern ride. And then we're going to schedule 2 on-demand rides as well. Hopefully everything is up and on demand at the right time. Sometimes it takes a little longer. But so here's the suggestion is ride live with Matt at 8, or you can do the same ride on demand at 11 Eastern or 2 Eastern. That should cover most of our time zones. You'll notice if you haven't done live rides, you're not going to see your power bar. You're not going to see everything reprogrammed in there. So don't panic when you don't see it. The automatic power bar, sorry. But just follow the cues and enjoy the ride. And I think that's going to be pretty exciting to be able to ride. Now, find your teammates, hashtag, are we calling them hashtags or tags? Tag Team Wilpers Cycling is our official tag for this program. And you need to make it your primary tag for it to show up on a leaderboard that way. But then you can see your teammates. You can narrow the leaderboard down to just your teammates with that tag, and you can find everybody there. Lots of high fives. This will be a good one. You're going to need it. So what else do we have? Oh, is that this week or next week? It is this week, yeah.
This week.
Yeah. Next week, I'm not going to go through the schedule because you can see it. I don't know if Brian wants to cover anything on the schedule on his side. Anything
No,
special we need to know?
No, nothing special for this week. Obviously, FTP test yesterday. The only thing I would say is on the long rides, again, we're servicing a large community here of people, and long is relative. For some people, an hour ride is a long ride. For some
Yeah.
people, 6 hour ride is a long ride. So the workouts on Saturday, the long rides, you really have two options. You have an indoor option. If it's crappy weather, you can't get outside, you're going to ride inside. I create an hour and a half workout that you can do that has a little bit more intensity to it. So since it's shorter duration, we bump up that intensity a little bit to maintain fitness. And then the longer rides are 2 hours plus, is really what we're calling it for outside rides. Of course, it can be lower. There's a couple of 80% efforts mixed in there. The rest of it's really zone two. So what I say is you can always extend the zone two efforts. Do
Right.
your main set, get those two 80% in, and then just extend the ride out as long as you want to ride for, relative to whatever your distance or your time goals or wants want to be. If you need suggestions for that, or you want a little more insight, again, reach out to us, post it up on Facebook, of what you're training for and how we might want to build that out. We'll
Hmm.
answer it. Other people will jump in and give you their two
Right.
cents as well.
Thank goodness for all the Matthew Smiths and the Jeff Himes and everyone else who shares their expertise, because
Oh, real quick
definitely,
on Nolan's question. Yes, assume it's always okay to go longer on the long rides, not
not
necessarily
harder.
harder, right?
Yeah.
Our long rides are not about how hard can I go. Our long rides are really focused in zone two with a little bit of zone three and zone four efforts, obviously because of hills and things like that. But we're trying to be at this low zone because we're trying to work on a very specific energy system, right? We want more fat adaptation. We want things to be happening at the cellular level that if we go too hard, those things can't happen. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that, the general rule is people go too hard on their easy days and not hard enough on their hard days. Long
Hmm.
rides are about easy days. I'd rather see you go too easy rather than too hard on those
Yeah.
days. All right. So
It's
not too
you
much
should
intensity.
not feel huge fatigue. As long as your nutrition and hydration is sufficient, you should end your long ride feeling like you did effort, but it shouldn't have destroyed you.
Yes. You can feel fatigue
I'm
the next
amazed.
day a little bit, but not
I have
the
not
day of.
been this disciplined in my long rides and staying in zone two in a very long time, because I like to go hard. And, it's very hilly where I live. And what I've started to notice is I'm climbing everything around me in zone two, which is just shocking. It's like, wow. And granted, I have some pretty good gearing on my bike to do that, but I always used to punch the climbs. And I'm not doing super long climbs, but I'm able to climb in zone two, which I don't think I've ever focused on that before. And it's a good feeling, actually. I mean, it's a little
Yeah.
demoralizing when people pass you up the hills, but to know that I can do this and I can do this all day long is really great. So I
Yeah.
haven't
And
had the
training
discipline.
peaks, this is one of those numbers that you get that power to heart rate combination, the power to heart rate ratio. You would see, like in these long rides, if you look at years past and this year, that decoupling wouldn't be so great,
Right.
right? Now my guess is your power and your heart rate are staying very even from the first half of the ride to the last half of the ride, where typically we start to see this heart rate go up and the power can start to drop, which is a sign
Hmm.
that you're losing fitness. And that's one of the things that happens when you're doing your hard long rides. Like you're
Right.
just doing your long rides hard, you start to get this decoupling and you're not gaining actual fitness in these long things. So
Hmm.
yeah, understand what the purpose of the long ride is. It's to be easy, it's to be chill. I know a lot of us like to do group rides and they
Right.
get spicy. It's okay to have that worked in there, and we will have like 15, 10, and 20-minute efforts in there, but the 80% of this ride needs to be zone two. That's
Yeah.
really your goal.
Yeah. My coach always says, don't go over FTP more than you have to.
Correct.
Right, because it's accumulating fatigue. So,
Yeah,
so
you should have a
Nolan,
solid
there's
FTP.
good to
You
go
should have a
long. I
solid
would,
FTP level.
yeah, and I would also say if you are doing an outdoor event and training to go longer for that outdoor event, think progression too. So we want to gradually increase. We don't want to go from a 2 hour ride to a 6 hour ride. We want to take those small 5 to 10% increase in volume as well. Um, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, half an
let your
hour is
body.
usually what my kind of
Right.
easy,
Go from 2 to
right?
2.5 to 3 to
The
3.5.
three, the three and a
It
half,
kind
and
of
stuff
breaks
like
that
that.
rule a little, but it's okay if you keep it easy and you
Yeah,
keep
the ten
moving in the
percent,
same pace.
I see that view more as like a running, right? Because
Ah,
of the
yeah,
impact, you don't want the bone and the
biomechanics.
and the yeah, and the joint, um, connective tissue to kind of
Mhm.
give it time. Cycling, we don't have as big of a concern about that. It's still a concern, so you don't want to go from 2 to 4 hours,
Right.
but a half hour chunk is usually pretty good. For most people, that's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10 miles difference, which I think is always good. And then when you look at the hard efforts, they're relative, right? So if I'm doing 20%, of hard effort, 80% easy. Well, if I'm at gaining a half an hour, well, that means I can add another, I don't know, 5 minutes or something of hard effort mixed in there,
Mhm.
right? So you just kind of keep building that the same.
Yeah.
All right,
I think
this has
the
been a long
only
one.
let me give one more
We got
piece of advice on long rides though, because a lot of people will look
go
at their
for it.
event and work backwards. And you may like a project plan, right? So here are my benchmarks, and I want to do this 6 hour event. And so that means I should be at X hours right now. You can't make a huge jump if you're not there. So that's where this breaks. We may have to start where we are now. We should start where we are now and build from
Yes,
there. So even so, maybe that 6 hour goal is going to be a big stretch for you as you get there, but you'll get there. And it's always easier
yeah,
to do things on event day too. So as we build
exactly.
those
My
in our
rule,
fitness,
my rule is always I'd rather my athlete get hurt on event day than before event day.
I'd rather my athlete doesn't get hurt at all. But hey,
No, of course. But if you're gonna like the risk of making the big jump is that an injury is gonna occur.
yeah,
So if
exactly.
that injury is gonna occur, like if your race is on Saturday, your event's on Saturday, and you wake up Sunday with sore knees, great. I'd rather you have sore knees the Sunday after your event
Yes,
than sore knees 2 weeks before your event.
because that's
Right?
going to
Like
impact your training in your event. Yeah,
exactly. And then you're gonna be definitely undertrained for that day. So
yeah,
like I always just have that in the back of my mind. I'm like, listen, man, if you're gonna and a lot of events are like this. Think about Ironman. It's a 12 to 15-hour day. No one does a 12 or 15-hour
right,
training day. Like we
right.
show up that day and we just assume it's going to be there. Same thing with like a 100-mile run. Like no one goes out and trains for 30 hours. Like you got to kind of, so it's okay to have these jumps. It's just understand what the risk reward is.
Yeah.
And we're trying
And
to
on that
mitigate that
note,
risk.
sorry
Yeah.
for going so
fif-
long, but lots of good
50 minutes
questions.
in,
We really appreciate you being here. It's way more fun to have you here with us than me just talking to Brian all the time. Um,
which is also
and
fun.
it is fun. We definitely enjoy this. So Brian's going to make a post. I will be on the page. Let's finish our first week with a bang, and we'll move on to week 2. So thanks,
Awesome. And good
everybody.
luck. Good luck to you, Lori, on your ride.
I'm so
And
excited.
Mary as well. Like I can't wait to
Yeah,
hear about both of it.
yeah. I get to meet her today, so that'll be great. We have
Awesome.
our mandatory writer meeting this afternoon, so we'll find out all the good stuff. Yeah,
Awesome, guys. Best of luck and good luck to everybody doing the challenge.
yeah.
Keep the rubber side down.
Woohoo! Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.